Oh, dating is hard. Really hard. Especially for leftist soy boys like me who have never really touched a woman. But hey, my pal, Roaming Millennial, has posted some great advice for how to date an intersectional feminist. Not really, of course. This is actually just a video of her talking shit about an intersectional feminist. In this case, it's a woman named Lara Witt, who wrote an article about questions an intersectional feminist should ask on a first date. Before really getting into those questions, Roaming Millennial gives Lara Witt's Twitter account a shout out with this.
She really seems to have a bug up her butt about white people. But whatever.
Wow, that looks bad. Even worse if you decide not to look at the context. Instead, if you spend about 1 minute looking into it, you'll see that this tweet is actually at the end of a tiny little thread commenting on a story about a mixed-race girl growing up in Ireland who was raised by white parents. It's a sad meditation on the limitations of colorblindness, and how pretending race is irrelevant is something that does a disservice to real discrimination. The idea is that living in a cloistered white world can leave someone of mixed racial background unprepared for a world that will judge them on the basis of their skin color. Now, I can't read Lara Witt's mind, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that her tweet about killing all the white people was a cheeky swipe at the idea of whiteness as a default identity, disregarding the real discrimination people of color face. I managed to decode that tricky bit of subtext by reading the actual text of what she wrote. And if you really want to ignore that context, I'd like to point out that Lara Witt has a white father and a white husband. Maybe Roaming Millennial should try doing some basic research when bringing up a tweet in a video. She can start by scrolling up slightly. Let's actually get to the meat of the article and Roaming Millennial's rebuttal.
Number 1, do you believe that Black Lives Matter? Yes? Wonderful. Let's start here. There are 3 categories that are non-negotiables for me: an understanding of race, class, and gender. I don't want to have laborious discussions where I have to prove to someone that white privilege or non-black privilege exists. If they are willing to learn and listen and make the space to decenter their whiteness, if they're white, that's a good place to start. People aren't debating whether Black lives do in fact matter. People are debating whether systemic racial injustice still exists. Is someone having a different opinion than you on the issue really that much of a turnout that you need to find out their position right away on the first date in order to screen them out?
Okay, what Roaming Millennial isn't getting here is that her position, and brace yourself here, is one of privilege. It's easy to be a non-black person and respectfully disagree with a friendly person who doesn't think that systemic anti-black racial discrimination exists because you literally don't have any skin in the game. If you're an asshole, you might not even care, I guess. But if you're someone who cares about injustice, systemic discrimination might bother you. And this may be another shocker, but there are some people out there, let's just call them intersectional feminists, who are passionate about fighting injustice. And if that passionate person is black and someone who therefore faces that systemic discrimination, they might not want to date someone who thinks they're delusional. Basically, this first point is a simple test of empathy, and Roaming Millennial failed.
Number 2, what are your thoughts on gender and sexual orientation? The gender binary is a tiny box and I wish it didn't exist, but it does. I can't imagine being with someone who is transphobic. As a feminist and woman of color, it would be a betrayal of what I stand for. Okay, this is something I see all the time, and it bothers me. Believing in a gender binary is not the same thing as being transphobic.
It kind of is transphobic. Not only does Roaming Millennial betray her ignorance on the subject, but she also denies the lived experience of people who fall outside the gender binary. Telling someone they're just confused in the face of evidence to the contrary is a pretty shitty thing to do. Oh, and since I know Roaming Millennial is such a lover of science and learning, I've included a link to my favorite science YouTuber, Concordance, and his video on binary gender. Maybe take 10 minutes out of your life and learn how to not be a dick, basically. There's no nice way to say that one. Never mind.
Number 3, how do you work to dismantle sexism and misogyny in your life? I've met cishet men who hate women. They say they love women, but that love is conditional on not having their toxic masculinity questioned or threatened in any way. and they love us as a monolith. They love what women have to offer, whether it is sex, food, love, care, emotional labor. They love us for what we can do for them, not because of who we are for ourselves. Wow, don't you hate it when men make their love for women conditional based on a woman's worldview? Gee, isn't it awful when men are only interested in women based on superficial aspects? Self-awareness, zero!
I think she's saying a worldview is superficial. I'm actually not sure what she's trying to say because it's hidden under the weight of this terrible joke. She thinks she's caught the author in a bout of hypocrisy. This is the point she's responding to. Wit is saying that an intersectional feminist probably wouldn't want to date a guy who subscribes to toxic masculinity. In fact, I'd wager a guess that most women wouldn't want to date a guy who subscribes to toxic masculinity. This seems obvious and sensible to me, and you would think Roaming Millennial would have understood it, having read it out loud just a few moments before her commentary, but no. She thinks having an ideology and criticizing someone else for having a different one is somehow hypocritical. It actually isn't when the two ideologies are polar opposites. You could even say they're conflicting. Also, an ideology is not superficial. It's actually the exact opposite. Jesus Christ. Let's move on.
I grew up with Jewish, Israeli, and non-Israeli friends and Palestinian friends. Before even understanding how power and oppression work together, we understood the trivial hatred that colonized and put in constant danger the lives of Palestinians every single day. Being pro-Palestine is not the same thing as being anti-Semitic. I shouldn't even have to express that, but being pro-Palestine and BDS is a necessary part of intersectionality. You know, I get why people like this aren't big fans of Israel. You got the whole colonialism, settler, military power thing going on, but I don't understand why they would choose to identify themselves as being specifically pro-Palestine. Try going to Palestine and talking about all this LGBTQ non-binary gender stuff.
Okay, so what do the LGBT policies of Israel or Palestine have to do with what Wit is talking about? Does Roaming Millennial think we should ignore people being oppressed by a colonial power because they aren't down with the LGBT community? Is this her trying to use SJW logic against itself? She doesn't really understand how SJW or regular logic seem to work in this case. And this is basically just whataboutism run amok, and it won't be the last time we see this.
Number 6. What is your understanding of settler colonialism and indigenous rights? I didn't grow up in the United States. I was raised in Switzerland, so my understanding of how Europeans committed genocide against indigenous populations here in the US was fairly limited. It required a good deal of my own research to really understand how settler colonialism works and how devastating the erasure and violence against Native Americans is and was. Your date thinks Native Americans are tropes or relics of the past? No thanks. No one thinks that. Just nobody.
Okay, this shit. She just kind of says that no one believes in it, right after reading a section where the author admits that she was someone who believed in it until she was educated on the subject. Are you taking in anything you're actually reading here?
If they support the school-to-prison pipeline, then there's a good chance they'll only value you for your ability to nurture them without any reciprocation. I feel like what she's actually saying here is that people who support capitalism can't love their partners. Love is just for communists.
And what the fuck? Love is just for communists? How did you get that from the idea of someone supporting school-to-prison pipelines not being very nurturing? Wow. Wait. Did Roaming Millennial just say capitalists support the school-to-prison pipeline? She just gave the game away. Hit it, boys.
Number 8. Can any human be illegal? We live on a tiny planet with land and water within a galaxy surrounded by a universe with an inconceivable number of other galaxies and planets. Yet here we dictate where we are and who is allowed to be where we are. Don't even know what she was trying to say with that. It seems like there were contradictory statements in those two sentences.
The problem with this line is that it's slightly incongruent and probably could have been worded more effectively had it focused on the vastness of the Earth rather than the vastness of the universe, which we can't really access. That's just me wearing my editor hat, of course. Roaming Millennial doesn't make any sort of commentary on that. What she's saying here is that she doesn't understand that the contradiction here is the point. You know, there's lots of space, yet we're saying where people can and can't be. Do you get it now? No? Okay.
But whatever. It's just really weird to me how she can claim that white Americans stole this land, yet that at the same time no one should be allowed to dictate where other people are. You can't be mad at whites being in the US while also saying that all people should be able to come to the US.
Do you not see the difference between letting people freely travel and migrate around the world and how that's different from colonizing a land and genociding the population? How do you not understand this?
Number 9. Do you support Muslim Americans and non-Muslim people from Islamic countries? I can't think of any other religion which has been vilified and lied about more than Islam in a cultural and systemic way. I am not Muslim, so I will stay in my lane, but I cannot imagine for a second even claiming to be a feminist if I didn't stand in solidarity with my Muslim friends and family. Guys, we need to make this plane ticket happen. I'm not even memeing right now. Let's send her to Saudi Arabia, home of the 2 most holy sites in Islam. Let's do it, guys.
So Roaming Millennial says she's not memeing, but I assume she is because she's a liar, or at least disingenuous, or maybe she doesn't know what memeing is. She doesn't understand most of what she's talking about. So yeah, maybe that's it. Anyway, Saudi Arabia is oppressive. What does that have to do with oppressing Muslim people in the US? Does Roaming Millennial not think this is happening? Or does she think it's less important than people being oppressed in other countries? What about ism strikes again? Also, read the title of point 9 again. Wit explicitly writes non-Muslim people in Islamic countries needing support too. So she was speaking out against oppression in Saudi Arabia? I don't know. I'm not surprised you missed it. You missed most of this article. We're not really learning anything responding to her, so here's a fun fact. The term whataboutism was coined as a response to Soviets who refused to talk about their country's misdeeds to focus on American ones. And if Roaming Millennial is using Soviet tactics, we did it again, boys. We won. Also, I'm not a tanky. Buddhist Stalinism, etc.
Number 10. Does your allyship include disabled folks? Be mindful of others who mock disabled people. That kind of cruelty is inexcusable. On a date with someone who uses ableist slurs, walk away. I don't think you should be cruel to disabled people. Don't think you should be cruel to anybody, really.
Roaming Millennial agrees with Witt's 10th point about not being cruel to people with disabilities. Who wouldn't, right? I mean, who could possibly find something wrong with that sentiment, right? I mean, who in their right mind would do something like that? Only a complete asshole. And I'm glad she agrees, right? Roaming Millennial is on board with this one. Well...
But I have the feeling that this person would probably qualify using the word retarded to describe something that was not literally retarded as ableist, which I don't agree with.
Why can't she just agree with Witt and move on? Does she really need to make something up just to talk shit? Also, for the record, using that word to describe someone or something is a shitty thing to do. There's nothing really here to engage with. She's just like, it's okay to say it, and doesn't explain herself.
You know, I'm actually starting to think that this list existing is a good thing and that all intersectional feminists should follow it so that people can know who you are and get out of there as quickly as possible.
That's a great line for a closer. This list was designed to screen out people exactly like Roaming Millennial. Very ironic. Personally, if I was on my first date ever and they brought up how shitty this Roaming Millennial video was, I'd be crushing on her pretty hard. I'm feeling kind of down now. I mean, if I listen to Roaming Millennial, intersectional feminists may be too nutty to date. Or at least the ones who follow that list, right? But, you know, what does Roaming Millennial even know? She can't even read a damn article. So I'll wrap this up, and I guess I'm going to be alone forever. Bye!